The real issue we need to be addressing is the housing crisis. We're here today because we want Waterways Ireland to take down the fences, to not put up hostile architecture, and to stop evicting refugees and Irish homeless people from the canal. As everyone knows, these fences have been up since early May. During this time, the far-right agitators have been targeting asylum seekers, pushing violent and racist content on social media, and normalizing casual racism amongst people in their community who have been negatively affected by the housing crisis. And all the while, they look down on Irish homeless people. Meanwhile, the housing crisis spirals on out of control. To date, there are over 13,000 homeless people in Ireland. The current housing targets set by the government are not even enough to cover population growth, let alone the backlog of homelessness. This housing crisis has been ongoing for decades, and there is no conceivable way that this is the fault of refugees or the homeless, and that is simply because they did not create the housing crisis. They are victims of it. The current housing crisis that is unfolding in Ireland is the direct result of housing policies and legislation that has been lobbied for by private corporations working with the government to protect the interests of capital over the interests of actual working people. Property industry lobby groups in Ireland have been influencing and creating government policy to benefit their profits at the direct expense of our living standards. This is a direct contradiction. In a research article published in 2019, a leading member of Property Industry Ireland, which describes itself as, quote, the most influential property group in Ireland, spoke with researchers from UCD and Queen's University Belfast and described meeting the then housing minister, Simon Coveney, who was supposedly developing the government's housing strategy to address supply issues and affordability, during which time the lobby group member said, and I quote, "And we gave him our recommendations and they took it, lock, stock, and barrel, and stuck it into the new housing bill," end of quote. Since 2016, property industry lobby groups have successfully lobbied the government to erode housing standards, including reducing the minimum size of apartments and increasing the number of apartments built in developments. These changes ultimately result in increased profits for them and reduced living standards for us. This work has brought us into direct contact with tenants of Dublin City Council who have been living in unacceptable housing conditions for years. We met a family with 2 children living in a 1-bedroom apartment who had been on the transfer list for 8 years. There are tenants of Dublin City Council who've been waiting for over 10 years to have their front door replaced. The people living in the flats have filed individual complaint after complaint after complaint. Dublin City Council has ignored the tenants' complaints or provided shoddy short-term solutions to address this. The people at the national level who actually have power to reorganize and properly fund public housing construction and maintenance don't, because that would affect the profits of the private corporations who they have to answer to, and if they want to keep their comfortable lifestyle, they better do what they're told. Because fundamentally, the people who own these large companies, the ones who own the vast amounts of land, the ones who owns the buildings, the corporations, the factories, and the politicians who rig the system in their favor in exchange for very comfortable lifestyles, do not care about these problems because it does not affect them. Targeting asylum seekers and the homeless for problems they did not create achieves nothing and is nothing but an exercise in barbarism. Ireland is one of the richest countries in the world. We are sitting on billions of euros. So why are we living like this? Why are we begging for our most basic human needs to be met? There are people who have had no other choice but to set up tents along the canal. And instead of asking why they're being driven to do that, Waterways Ireland has chosen to forcibly remove their tents, put these fences up, while the far right comes at them with dogs and hurleys. So we need to be clear on this. We need to start acting and standing up. If we want a just and peaceful society free of racism, then get active. Join your local community group. Join your local tenants union. Join your union. Talk to people. Talk about this. Get out onto the streets.